Flexibility has become the new norm in the workplace. More than anything else, people are going to places that offer flexible work environments. Flexibility is the most important thing that people are looking for when it comes to this healthy kind of workplace culture. And I think this is really important because this is more than remote working. People want to go to a place that gives them flexibility to be the people that they were, to be the people that they are. And what we're recognizing is that we are more than our jobs. We are more than our occupation. We are more than the title on our business card. The workforce is made up of parents, of spouses, of family members, of neighbors. We have multiple identities. We wear different hats. We are more than our job. And so we need to be in a workplace that recognizes all of those competing interests, those competing callings, those callings that carry weight in our life. And that's what I love about the Great Resignation is that people are reprioritizing their life around that which matters. And they want to work at a place that sees people, that sees me, that sees us for who we really are, not just for what we can do for the bottom line. And you see this in our desire for flexibility. We want to live into the callings that define us and shape us, and we're choosing our jobs, our occupations based on flexibility, based on grace. Now, I think this is fascinating, this thing that we need, this craving for flexibility, because if I'm thinking about our culture in general, I wouldn't define it as flexible. You know, in our work, we're craving cultures, we're craving an environment that is flexible, that is gracious to us. But when I think about the world that we're living in, our culture as a society, it is anything but flexible. In fact, I would describe it as something totally different, maybe even the opposite. I would say more than anything, it feels to me, pandemic aside, that we are living in a culture that values rigidity more than flexibility. When it comes to our thinking or when it comes to our opinions, our politics, our culture, I think we become like rigid, like way more rigid than we've ever been in the past. We're living in a culture where we hear things or we say things like you're either with me or you're against me. If you make a mistake or if you say the wrong thing or if you say something that I don't agree with, then we're going to cancel you. It's my way or the highway. You're either on my team or you're my enemy. And we're living in a culture that is so rigid, that is rigid in our thought, that is rigid in our politics, that's rigid in our worldview, rigid in our expectations. And yet we are living in a season where we are choosing work environments because of their flexibility and their grace. We want to be in flexible environments, but we're becoming increasingly rigid individuals in how we live and move and have our being. I started reading this book earlier in the year. It's written by Adam Grant, and it's called Think Again. And it's a great book. I want to invite you to consider reading it. It's a challenging read. It's a quick read, but it's a thought-provoking read. And what he talks about is the challenge in our society right now. It has to do with our ability or our inability to rethink anything. Grant shares how people are quick to form opinions and are rarely willing to change our minds. Even when we are clearly in the wrong or at least not making any sense, we don't ever like to change our minds. He talks about the reason for this is mental laziness or apathy. And he says we just simply don't care if we're wrong anymore. All we care about is what we know, and what we know is right. And we don't care if you have an argument that proves us wrong. We know what we know, and we're sticking to it. And so we don't rethink anything. We think what we think, and nothing's going to change that. We get cemented in our opinions or our beliefs. And he shares this story that's really fascinating to kind of prove the point. And it's a story that I'm sure you've heard too. He tells the story about this frog. And it's a story about a frog. Like if you throw a frog in a boiling pot of water, the frog is going to jump out because he knows that water is dangerous. It's a dangerous environment. But if you put a frog, that same frog, in a pot of warm water and then gradually raise the heat, the temperature, the frog won't jump out. He won't perceive the threat. He won't see that things are changing around him, and he's going to boil up and eventually die. You've probably heard that before, right? You've heard that story about the frog that jumps out of the boiling pot, and survives, but then dies in the slow heat of a pot coming to boil. You've probably heard that. It makes sense to you, right? Do you know that that's 100% false? Like if you throw a frog into a boiling pot of water, he's going to die. The frog will die a horrible death, or at minimum be burned very, very badly, which would be like an awful outcome for that frog. But if you put a frog in a lukewarm pot of water and then you start to raise up the heat, gradually, he's going to jump out of the water the second he's uncomfortable. He's going to survive and be just fine. But there's something in us that doesn't believe that, because we heard it a long time ago, from somebody that we trusted, an influencer or a teacher or an article or a pundit on TV. We heard that story and we believed it because it made sense. And we trusted in the person telling us the story. It doesn't matter that it's 100% false. In fact, because I just told you that story is 100% false, my guess is you're still going to believe that that's true, that it's safe to throw a frog in a boiling pot of water and he's going to survive. But that's untrue. The frogs don't have a problem adjusting to the world around them, to rethink their situation. We typically have a problem with that. We don't like to rethink things. We don't like to be flexible in our opinion, to show grace to others in their shortcomings. We struggle with our rigidity, and yet we long for places that promote flexibility. And what I know is that if you're looking for purpose and for meaning and for abundance in your daily living, embracing and embodying flexibility and grace is perhaps the most important thing that you can learn to do. As people of faith, as family members, as friends, as co-workers, as neighbors, we are called to embody flexibility. We are called to embody grace. This is essential to our well-being, to becoming the people that God longs for us to be. I think about our faith, and I think about what it means to follow Jesus and to trust in Jesus. And I think when we think about that, we have to remember that Jesus, more than anything else, embodied flexibility and grace. It was maddening to follow Jesus in his public ministry. He was always open to the uninvited interruption. He was always caring for those who were on the outside looking in. He was always stopping to heal the underserved. He was always stopping to care for the person that was a stranger in his midst. I think about countless stories in the gospel where Jesus would stop and care for people and tend to people. I think about all of those different stories involving like the man on the mat, or the Samaritan woman at the well, the hemorrhaging woman, Jairus' daughter. I think about the lepers and the blind man at Bethesda. I think about all these people that just kind of stepped in his way, and he opened up his world. He was flexible, malleable, always adapting to the people in his midst to heal, to love, to show grace. Jesus embodied flexibility perhaps better than anybody else in the world. And more than that, he embodied it, but he also invited us to go and do the very same things. He invited his ordinary ragtag group of disciples to do the same things, to go and do likewise, to be open in how it is that they thought about the world, to rethink their identities as followers of Jesus, as people that are flexible, that are gracious, that are loving without condition everywhere it is that we went, to whomever was in the road that we were walking down.